because I was going to call this panel The Rise of the Apocalyptic Wasteland Where Robots Hunt Us Down for Sport. But we're going to get to that in just a second. You guys all have microphones?
Making a robot coffee.
Hello everyone, I'm Deepak Sekar. I'm the founder and CEO of Chowbotics. We have this robot called Sally, which makes salads, grain bowls, yogurt bowls, and snacks as well. We've got around 30 locations all over the US, and it's meant for offices and restaurants and convenience stores.
Hi everybody, my name is Rishi. I work for a company that makes this robot called Rotimatic. It's the world's first ever flatbread making robot. We've sold 40,000 units and our users have made more than 30 million rotis on it. And the flatbread market is pretty large. It has people make around 3 billion rotis by hand every day, and Rotimatic is the first ever automation in that market.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to quickly interject. My friends love that machine, by the way. So if you guys ever want to make rotis, make sure you get one of those.
And it's they're on the sponsor booth around the corner. Like they've got a machine up there making rotis. So, but that leads me into a really good first question, because in a recent interview with Mike Wolf, who was just on stage, you said the Rotimatic was indeed a robot and not an appliance. So I want to understand from everybody here, what is a robot? And Rishi, we'll start with you.
Okay. So what is a robot? This is a very contentious question. So from our point of view, a robot is an electromechanical device that does a series of complex steps. And I would have stopped at this definition if I was giving this answer a decade ago. But now we'd also add that it also must be intelligent enough to do complex set of tasks in an electromechanical fashion with some level of intelligence built in.
So it'll be able to adapt. If point A to point B, something comes up, it'll be able to go, okay, I need to do this.
Yeah.
Okay.
So an appliance would be a device where from input to output, point A to point B, it would be a hard-coded program, whereas a robot would adapt to its inputs.
Okay, Deepak?
I'm an engineer with a PhD. I spent way too much time in school, so I'm going to go with the professorial definition. The textbook definition of a robot is one where you've got motors, and you've got sensors whose feedback controls the operation of the motors. So that would make a whole bunch of things robots.
We've got time if you want to read your thesis. Just bring it up on your phone. We can go through it all step by step.
So earlier when we were backstage, I was joking that this was going to be one of the more contentious subjects. So also an engineering degree here. Yes, on the electromechanical and the sensor feedback aspect of it. I think the easier definition is actually just a robot is something that isn't commonplace enough for you to actually think of it as, just part of your normal daily life. So a lot of roboticists would actually argue that, dishwashers, microwaves, those are all robots. We just don't think of them as robots because they're so useful and so integral to our day-to-day that, to think of it as a robot would be to otherize it.
Okay, so with that in mind, what are robots, and I'll start with you this time, what are robots good at and what are robots bad at?
So this is also something I like to joke about with a lot of my friends, but the things that robots are really good at are incredibly precise mechanical rotate tasks. And I like to say that you could probably design a robot that could do any one single thing better than the most expert human master in that subject. But you cannot get a robot to do as many things as a baby. So that's kind of what I like to say.
Okay,
So McKinsey actually did a study on this a few years back. The prices for robots have been going way down the past few years. An industrial robot right now costs around 5x less compared to what it did 5 years back. So when prices for new technology goes down, when prices go down, they start addressing newer and newer markets. So McKinsey wanted to see what sort of markets robots could address now with all these price declines. And they actually found out the number one market which robots can address are accommodations and food service. And they found out around 48% of food service and accommodation tasks in restaurants and hotels could be automated because they're fairly repetitive. You do the same thing again and again. And so that's what robots are good for. If you've got repetitive tasks where you do the same thing again and again, robots are a pretty good fit. They don't get bored, they don't get tired, they don't take out their cell phones and start browsing if they have to do the same thing for 3 or 4 hours continuously. And on the other hand, if a task involves a lot of interaction with humans and emotions, then robots are not a good fit. That's why you need humans. So if you look at restaurants today and you think about where robots could be used 5 or 10 years from now, in the kitchen where you've got repetitive tasks where you have people just prepping ingredients all day long, those are places where robots can be good. But if you look at front of the house where you actually have servers and you have a lot of human interaction, and if you look at head chef jobs and things like that, those are places where humans are better suited for a long, long time, I believe.
Does the precise, repetitive nature of robots work against the Rotimatic, where I would think you would have like a particular, yes, you get the consistency, right? Like everything will come out the same, but maybe there's a certain tweak that can happen, and can that be replicated, right? Like, oh, my mom made this particular way, and your robot can't do it because it's already doing it this other way.
Your question is also a little bit related to the last question you asked. So the definition of a robot of doing a task repetitively,
Yeah.
it's a good definition, but today what is happening is that robots are using a little bit more judgment than they used to. So the state of the art of artificial intelligence is catching up to a certain extent where your robots are doing the mechanical task, but maybe they are doing it within a wider boundary than before. So robots are still good at adjusting their path a little bit. What robots are really, really bad at is perhaps creativity or doing things that are very, very closer to the human emotions.
Right, but to that point though, you guys, all three of you are creating things that are very personal for people, right? Like whether it's the flatbread or it's the office lunch, like I don't just want fuel, I want something that's gonna taste good while I eat it, and you know, I'll be a high traffic area. And also craft coffee, right? So there's a certain amount of, yes, I wanna be able to walk up and get it quickly. I'm not looking to sit down and have a meeting at Cafe X probably, but I do, well, as lovely as the corner of Sansom and Bush is, for, you know, they have a robot in a box barista. Are you familiar with Cafe X? Why don't you quickly describe it for them so they get a sense? Because there's intention behind it, right? The way it's designed and built, it is, of the three, it's probably the most, as people think about a robot, it's the closest to what comes to their mind because it is an articulating arm, it's got grippers, it's on display so people can see it, and it can interact with it.
It is visually arresting, which is great for marketing purposes. But really, I actually like to think of this more from a user journey perspective. What is the actual underlying problem you're trying to solve for? And you know, when we think about Cafe X, we're really thinking about, you know, the traditional cafe experience and how we're actually improving upon all aspects of it. The press loves to talk about the arm, but that's not really the point. It's a means to an end. So the end that we're actually trying to work towards are solving the key user pain points. The first one being the line. When you walk into a typical cafe, there's usually 1 or 2 cashiers max. And there's always that one guy at the front of the lines, like he's never ordered coffee before in his life. And so he's taking 5 minutes to decide if he wants a cappuccino or a latte. And how many of you guys have seen that? Because I've definitely seen that all the time. I've sometimes been that person. The second pain point is the actual coffee making itself, the underlying quality of the beverage. And again, in a traditional sort of mass market cafe, there's a lot of inconsistency between baristas. Some of them are incredibly well trained and win world championships. For others, it's their first day on the job. And you know, we're all human, so even the best people have down days. They're sick, maybe something happened at home. And you know, because, and sort of, hope there aren't any Starbucks people here, but they're sort of somewhat pejoratively known in the industry as star burnt. Because their beans are roasted so dark, they might as well be burned. And part of the reason for that is to actually mask the inconsistency in the underlying product. So the analogy I like to use is beef, where if you cook, you know, steak well done, it doesn't really matter what quality of beef you're using. You just cooked all the flavor out of it. It's kind of the same thing with coffee. Whereas with Cafe X, because we're using a machine, the machine is incredibly precise. It's always going to use the same quantity of beans, same temperature, same amount of milk, same amount of water. And because of that, we're actually able to significantly increase the quality of the ingredients that we're using. So we work with roasters like Ritual, Intelligentsia, Equator, all very great high-quality roasters, organic milk, Oatly, things like that. So the base quality of the product is better. And then last but not least is the pickup process. Again, I know how many of you guys go to Starbucks, but there's sort of, a lot of people say that they have a Starbucks name, or if they go to a restaurant, they have like a restaurant name that they use for reservations. And it's often because a lot of the people who are taking your order, maybe they're busy and, they're not really paying attention. And so they write down whatever it is that they think they heard, which oftentimes is not actually your name. So I have a friend called Yusuf, for example, and I know how to spell his name, but he's gotten all sorts of things every year. Like, I think sometime one guy at Starbucks wrote down USA on his cup. And he was looking for his cup of coffee and couldn't find until he figured out maybe that was supposed to be him. Or maybe there's 3 Chris's in the room, and one Chris ordered a normal latte, another one ordered it with 2 pumps of vanilla, the third ordered it with soy. And so we're really trying to solve for the actual traditional cafe experience. The robot is a means to an end.
Okay, speaking of means to an end, and hastening our apocalyptic vision of the future. No, we joked about it upstairs, backstage, where the studies have shown that millions of jobs across the world will be lost to automation. The food service in particular is susceptible to it. Deepak, are you bringing about the end of the world?
I'm hoping not.
Is Sally the salad-making robot doing that?
This is actually something which is pretty important to me. I've lost a lot of sleep thinking about whether the things I'm building as the founder of a company are going to result in people losing jobs. And robots are going to take away jobs, there's no doubt about it. What we've done with Sally, though, is we're trying to go after a different sort of market. You can use robots for reducing labor. You can use robots for other things like making healthy food available or making food safety better. So if you look at Sally, our first robot, the amount of labor compared to a salad bar is actually the same. A human does prep the ingredients in the kitchen and loads up Sally, just like they would load up a salad bar. So what Sally does is makes the salad bar experience more hygienic because you don't have people with dirty hands touch the salad bar. And it also makes the fresh food available 24/7. Takes a lot less space than a salad bar. So we're not really reducing labor, really, with Sally. And even with our future products and our roadmap, we made a decision not to go after the labor reduction market with robots. We would just go after making healthy food accessible. So we call our market health food robotics.
Okay.
So, but yeah, robots are going to take away jobs in the next 10 years. There's no doubt about it.
Or elevate them.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing, right? Like, what should humans be spending their time doing with the Rotimatic, right? Are you, you're not necessarily taking away jobs, but is there a cultural impact? The history of making roti by hand or any kind of flatbread.
I think any technology innovation does change people's habits, and it is happening because of Rotimatic as well. People are eating more at home, and they're ordering less food from outside. So maybe in some remote connection, we are taking away jobs at the restaurant or the kitchen or the factory that is making processed food. But having said that, I think the world needs to transform in the right ways, and if it is happening because of technology, the rest of it configures by itself and adapts.
Okay. And Cafe X makes a point of saying we will always have a person on hand to guide you through, right? So that gets back to your elevating position, right? You don't have somebody just misspelling your name on a cup, but you have somebody walking you through going, if you like this, then I would recommend trying this, right? And that's something that your founder has said is always going to be a part of the company, wherever you open up, right?
Yeah, so prior to, 2 startups ago, so prior to Cafe X and prior to SoftBank, I was at a hospitality startup. And one of the things that we saw in the hotel industry was this trend towards a sort of bifurcation in customer experiences. On the one hand, we had a certain demographic that was very, very comfortable with technology, They wanted to do online check-in, keyless entry, walk straight to your room, don't talk to a human being. And then we had a second demographic of customers who were very, very high touch. They wanted to go up to the front desk. They wanted to talk to someone, ask a bunch of questions. And we actually see something very similar at Cafe X. We have a lot of regulars who, for them, the robot's kind of beside the point. They've seen the robot hundreds of times. Like, they don't really care about the gesticulating arm. They just want really, really great coffee at a really, great price, $3, and without the wait. They walk in and out, they order on their mobile app, they're out in 5 seconds. And then that's one demographic. We have a second demographic of customers who, really want to engage. They, want to get that full experience. They want to know what a cortado is. What's a single origin bean? Why do we have 3 different roasters? What's a roaster anyway? And they, really like to engage in that conversation with our coffee bar specialists, who are the people that, he was referring to that, staff all of our machines. And, that's one experience too. And I think that true hospitality is about meeting your user where they're at, not imposing an experience on them, but almost allowing a little bit of a, choose your own adventure.
So what kind of cost efficiencies are you able to generate using a robot, right? So what I've heard you all say is you want to make good, healthy food for people, right? And by using automation, we'll just use the term automation, right? Or robotics, I guess. How are you able to improve just in terms of supply chains or cost efficiency or labor costs? Granted, we're talking about the elephant in the room and jobs lost, but let's just get to the economics. There's a reason for doing this, right?
Yeah, I can give you one example. We put a Sally in a convenience store in Mountain View, and we can do an entree-size customizable salad for $3.49. It's the lowest price entree salad in Silicon Valley. And the reason why the salad price is so low is because what they used to do before was they used to get a salad which was boxed by a machine somewhere else, and it was put in the convenience store. And once they put a Sally in there, they could get the produce right from Cisco Foods or US Foods, and they could fill in the produce themselves. And they cut out one aspect of the supply chain. They cut out the middleman who was packaging the salads and getting 40% margin. And because of that, they could price the salads lower, and they could make fresh food accessible and more affordable to people. And it was available 24/7 as well. What they found out also was because they put a Sally in there and the salad was customizable, the number of salads they sold at that location went up anywhere from 2x to 5x depending on the week it was, because people want more customizable food as well. So essentially what this did to the convenience store was it boosted salad sales. It gave them an image of trying to bring healthy food to people. It made fresh food accessible to people. It made it a lot more affordable to people. And it's all a win. And in fact, it actually created labor because convenience stores don't have too much fresh food right now. And if you start bringing fresh food to a convenience store and someone else needs to prep the ingredients, then it's actually creating jobs for those people who refill the machines, who prep ingredients for those machines as well.
Well, I'm pretty sure people in Silicon Valley can only afford a $3.50 salad because all the money is in their $1 million teardown. So I know in your conversation with Mike, you were talking about how there were prepackaged things out there, but you didn't want to get into the Keurig for roti business, right? So there's a certain degree to where you didn't want to create so much efficiency that you lost something in the product.
So we always wanted to hold certain principles very dear to simplistic. One was the principle around having things fresh. And once you go into the capsule model, at least in our business where people are making flat bread, it just doesn't fit very well together. So we made a decision against going into capsule. And to answer your question on economics, every flatbread that you make out of Rotimatic costs around 5 cents compared to a frozen one that you buy from the market, which costs around 50 cents. So it's a huge cost savings for the end consumer.
Okay. And then, I think about, you're not the only robot coffee company in the game, right? But it seems like you're targeting high traffic areas, right? And it seems the efficiency you bring, I think you were talking about it, in really high volume areas like an airport or something where you can operate literally all day long. Although with your human, would you, in a place like an airport or someplace like a college campus, would you have somebody on staff all day or would you still have hours?
Probably peak hours. I think there are a couple of points that you sort of implicitly brought up that I could try to address. The first is today we're doing coffee. We're called Cafe X, not Coffee X. So I just sort of wanted to sort of touch on that a little bit. You know, coffee is what we're starting with. Margins are excellent. It's a great business to be in. It is by no means the end of our ambitions. So that's the first point. The second is, I think, going back to one of your earlier points around the business model, and you know, this is coffee, it's not rocket science. It's pretty basic inputs here. You have real estate costs, labor, COGS. Real estate, we are far superior to a traditional sort of cafe because we only fit in about 40 square feet, give or take, which means that a lot more types of real estate are open to us, like airports, like lobbies of office buildings that wouldn't traditionally be available. Labor, we have different kinds of labor. You know, we have engineers on staff, which are much more expensive than your traditional barista worker. And our COGS are actually somewhat better, even though we're using higher quality ingredients because we have less waste. But I think going back to your last point around, like, you know, airports specifically, you know, definitely something that we're looking at. You know, there are lots of airports that have invited us to be there. We actually just cannot physically manufacture enough of these machines right now to supply demand.
Right. I could add a comment on the need for humans. Humans are necessitated in California simply because there's a rule which prevents you from having vending machines which serve potentially hazardous food. And so you're forced to have a human if the deployment is in California, because that's the only way the health department approves it. There are deployments in Texas. There's this company called Brigo, which does coffee as well. They have one machine at the Austin airport, and they're good friends of mine as well. There, they don't need to use humans because Texas, anything goes.
Different governments.
Okay, we're almost out of time here, and I want to get just sort of sense on this sort of bigger topic, which is here in the U.S. at least, robots are still a novelty. So they will walk by a Cafe X, and the Cafe X will wave at it. And they'll think, oh, that's amazing, and you see them walk by. Or, salad, like a salad-making robot, or a roti. I have it on my counter, and it's a roti-making robot. When will it move from a novelty? You can just give me sort of a broad range here, what do you think? When will food robots that people interact with move from a novelty to sort of an everyday? Rishi, we'll start with you, and then come on down the pike.
What's your take on when will autonomous cars drive? When will they take over?
10 months from now.
Okay. My timeline is not that
wrong?
optimistic.
Am I
that is for you to decide.
Well, but that's a little different, right? Because that's high-speed vehicles traveling, with all sorts of, I don't think a roti's going to go a Rotimatic's going to go 75 miles an hour down the highway. Unless I'm wrong, unless that's an over-the-air update coming.
I mean, we hope that happens soon in a different way. We are hoping to see kitchens that will be autonomous. Like mobility has gone from trying to be automatic with still not solving the main problems of mobility to sort of now taking a leap and saying, hey, you know what, maybe autonomous is the way to go. And from our point of view, kitchens need to take that leap. Kitchen tech needs to take that leap to go from our thinking of making devices more automatic to taking them to being autonomous. And I think we should see this not in 10 months, but within a decade, where we see bulk of our cooking being automated with special purpose robots within the home, within the kitchen, within a decade.
He says 10 years. Can I get 5? Can I get 5? Can I get 5 years?
So it all depends on the market. If you look at computers, you had mainframes in the 1960s. They were the size of a room, insanely expensive. And then you had the mini computers from DEC and all these guys. Those were in the 70s. Those were smaller than the mainframes, less expensive. And finally, you had the home version, the personal computer from Apple and IBM, which was much smaller, a lot more affordable. I think of food robots as having a similar trend. All these years, everyone in this room has been eating food made by a robot. Anytime you get tortillas in the grocery store or frozen food from a grocery store, those were made by robots. And we've been using these the last 10 or 20 years. So what I see happening in the next 5 years, you wanted 5 years. What I see happening in the next 5 years is the equivalent of the mini computer, where it's smaller than the giant factory frozen food robots. and it's more affordable as well, and that's kind of what we are trying to do here. Our robot is a 30-inch by 30-inch sized robot, and eventually in 10 years, like Rishi says, we'll have mainstream robots in the home, the equivalent of the personal computer, where it's going to be a $500 price point, it's going to be much smaller, and it actually fits on your countertop. So that's how I see the evolution happening.
All right.
I mean, like I mentioned at the beginning, robots really just something that you haven't quite seen before. It's not useful enough for your day-to-day life for you to actually think of it as, being an appliance or something else in the home. I think from what we've seen at Cafe X, roughly about your third visit at Cafe X, you're not paying attention to the robot anymore. You just want your coffee. And so I think there'll still be a period where, every new food robot you see, that's still going to be a novelty for a little bit. But once it becomes part of your daily ritual, it's beside the point. That, again, coming from like a product-centric user perspective, the underlying product is actually what's important. So you come for the robot the first time, the second and third time, you're coming for the coffee.
Fantastic, and that is a great place to end it. Thank you so much. Big round of applause for our robot panel here.